How much money would you be willing to splurge on a car? $20,000? $30,000? Now, what if the car was one of a kind, the only one of that type ever made? Would you spend $100,000? 1 million? $18 million? That is exactly what happened in the case of the new Bugatti La Voiture Noir, which sold for $18.7 million. CNBC reports that La Voiture Noir is so exclusive, the Bugatti is only making one unit. In fact, what you're seeing here is only the concept model of the car, because the real one hasn't even fully been made. Bugatti says they still need 2 years to finish the car. But what makes one-of-a-kind cars like these expensive? The answer lies in the economic theory of a 19th century economist named Thorstein Veblen. He proposed that consumers splurge on luxury unique items to increase their social status because of pecuniary emulation, or the psychological need to feel valued and respected, and conspicuous consumption, where the consumer's behavior is wasteful and only serves to impress and instill envy in others, which then perpetuates the cycle. This consumer behavior is unique in that the demand for a product increases the more limited and the more expensive it is. Scholars have attributed conspicuous consumption to two main causes: cultural values like masculinity, individuality, and power, and social networks like social media, where influencers steer consumer behavior in certain directions. This means that in developed societies, the uber rich, or those who accomplished freelance author Christopher Ketchum describes, produce nothing of real value, are the winners, while the common worker who holds up society on their back, who toils for society, is degraded, devalued, and looked down upon.
We don't need to look that far to see conspicuous consumption. Take Grammy-winning rapper Kartike, who owns 5 cars from Lamborghinis to Maseratis, and yet never learned to drive. To these celebrities, their Maseratis and their Bugattis are a display of power. Posting cars on her Instagram while not being able to tell the difference between an accelerator and a brake isn't a matter of utilitarian need, but a display of material excess. This is indicative of what Professor Liming Sun calls a fixed mindset, where a consumer gravitates towards products that are inherently display their qualities, that are viewed as desirable. Of course, this is assuming that rich can be considered a personality trait. And that's why Professor Swan notes that these individuals remain the cornerstone of the luxury brand market. Hey, I think it's pretty obvious that brands selling 22-karat gold toilet paper for $1 million don't exactly cater to your everyday Joe. Neither does an $18 million Bugatti. Bastiat Prize-winning author Virginia Postrel explains that conspicuous consumption is built on a class-based divide, specifically in areas where there are high levels of interaction between wealthier and poorer consumers. In these places, she explains that the rich enforce their supposed superiority through these excessive displays of wealth. As such, we observe a cycle in which the rich and powerful continue to pursue further luxury and exclusivity at the expense of the economically disadvantaged. Sadly, during the coronavirus, author Libby Watson highlights inequities in access to critical medical equipment, where the high status or important wealthy acquired masks and ventilators even as public hospitals faced major shortages, hurting the common worker. She warns that the wealth gap enforced by conspicuous consumption enables these inequalities, where the poor are left defenseless in times of crisis and on the verge of death as the rich hunker down protected by their wealth and status.
In the same way that conspicuous consumption is damaging our social structure, it is also damaging our environment. Now, however, it's not an issue that can be solved at just the top level. The chase for a lavish lifestyle is one that never ends. However, our supply of resources will. Hubert Kempf, a professor at the National Research University Higher School of Economics, explains that the propensity for emulation is human nature, which is why everyone attempts to engage in the same conspicuous waste as the rich, creating massive amounts of demand for unnecessary things and manifesting a need for corporations to participate in large-scale overproduction and waste. As long as the cycle of excessive waste and cheap practice continues, the Earth as we know it doesn't have much time left. The largest corporations from the West have a profit motive, and Cole of the NCBI explains that the more companies have to produce to meet exceeding demand, the more they use extremely harmful methods of waste disposal, starting thousands of landfills and excessive trash incinerations, which the EG states releases 3 times as much carbon dioxide as coal. Without solvency, the future is bleak, as the Associated Press concludes that the world could hit the 1.5 degree mark in global temperatures by 2024, surpassing a universal threshold of safety and proving that current climate recovery attempts have been unsuccessful. The only way to even mitigate these adverse effects is to reduce the stigma around materialism, which would naturally reduce the need for consumption and thus the climate change impacts it causes. While effective in theory, this has been practically impossible, as Veblen's concepts still hold true after a century. We are in dire need for change. It's hard to believe that a 19th century economist predicted modern consumer behavior, but Thorstein Veblen's theory of conspicuous consumption forms the backbone of modern society. From the extravagant spending of Cardi B to the outrageous $18 million Bugatti, conspicuous consumption perpetuates social inequality through the display of wealth, contributes to the deteriorating environment, and also dictates consumer behavior.